Coming up at 6, New York State troopers involved in a shooting in the North Country. The new information we've received. Water problems on Christmas night impact a number of Vermont towns. Things are fixed, but there's an extra step some may need to take. And a look at what prompted U.S. airstrikes in the Middle East.
This is ABC 22 News at 6.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Matt Laufer. Lauren is off tonight. First at 6, a death investigation in northern Vermont after a man is found dead at a home in Newport Town. Police say it happened on Lawson Road on Christmas night. The person killed is 58 years old. Their name has not been released. State police say there was a fight at the home. Another person went to the hospital and was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Police say the two people know each other and that this is an isolated incident. At this point, no one is charged and no one is in custody. A Plattsburgh woman is in the hospital after she was shot by New York State troopers. It happened Monday morning just after 10:30 at the entrance to the Loon Lake Mountain Trailhead. Troopers say they were sent there to perform a welfare check. That's where they found 46-year-old Jessica Chase of Plattsburgh in her vehicle with a gun. According to police, Chase didn't comply with their commands, then drove her vehicle at troopers. Chase was then shot by troopers. She went to University of Vermont Medical Center in Burlington with non-life-threatening injuries. At last check, she was listed as stable. The water is back on in South Burlington tonight, but there were problems around the area Christmas evening. South Burlington police first alerted us to the issue last night, saying there were intermittent water service issues around the city. According to the Champlain Water District, there was a water main break in Colchester and it impacted some of the surrounding communities. Everything was repaired overnight and service was restored early this morning. The Water District says some customers may have cloudy water initially. If that's the case, just run the cold water for 30 seconds to clear things up. In downtown Burlington, the former VFW building on South Winooski Avenue is now the location of the city's winter warming shelter, offering low barrier access to beds for those currently experiencing homelessness. Sarah Russell is the city's special assistant to end homelessness. She says that so far, shelter operations have been running smoothly, but the number of people in need of these services continues to grow.
Since the initial closure of the motel program on June 1st earlier this year, we've seen a pretty significant increase in unsheltered homelessness. All of our homeless shelters across the city have been at full capacity for quite some time now.
Since the shelter is low barrier, there are no requirements for personal identification nor relating to sobriety. The winter warming shelter will continue to serve guests until its planned closure this upcoming March 15th. Turning to the Middle East, where the U.S. carried out airstrikes on Iran-backed militant sites. The Pentagon says President Biden ordered those strikes in response to those militants launching a series of attacks on U.S. forces, and as recently as Christmas Day. ABC 22's Justin Finch is following the latest from Washington.
In Washington, the Defense Department revealing President Biden himself gave the order last night for the U.S. to strike Iran-backed militants operating in Iraq. The Defense Department says those U.S. airstrikes leveled at least 3 sites used by the Iran-backed paramilitary group Hezbollah brigades. The U.S. responding to frequent attacks on American and coalition forces in the region, including a Christmas Day attack. The Pentagon says a self-detonating drone wounded 3 service members at a U.S. base in northern Iraq, one of them left in critical condition. The White House says the president was immediately briefed on that attack and later called for those strikes, which focused on sites tied to the group's use of drones. The Pentagon says since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, there have been more than 100 attacks on U.S. and coalition troops in Iraq and Syria. U.S. Central Command says there were no signs the U.S.'s retaliatory strikes impacted civilians. Mourners and some Iraqi officials condemning the U.S.'s actions. The Iraqi government says at least 1 militant was killed and more than a dozen others injured. And the Biden administration is warning if attacks on U.S. and coalition forces continue, the U.S. will respond. Justin Finch, ABC News, Washington.
Much more on those airstrikes coming up at 6:30 on World News tonight. Turning to health news, a lot of people in this country may have a respiratory illness during the holidays. The CDC is monitoring very high levels of respiratory illness in at least 9 states, mostly in the South. Another dozen states are facing high levels of the illness. There's been a 200% increase in the flu, 60% increase in RSV cases, and more than a 50% increased rate of COVID-19 spreading. The spread of COVID could be due to a new subvariant of Omicron. COVID cases are up for the 6th straight week, according to the CDC, while vaccination rates are lagging. Nationwide, only 18.5% of people have gotten an update on their COVID vaccine.
You want to make sure that you have that protection, that high quality mask, washing your hands, making sure you're updated on your vaccines, and always preparing for the highest risk person in the room.
Doctors also recommend RSV vaccines for babies under 8 months, pregnant women, and adults who are 60 years or older. Some encouraging news: while the CDC is tracking growing flu hospitalizations, data shows the number of new admissions still remains low. When we come back, we're looking back at some of our favorite stories of the past year, and some of the area's hidden treasures may lie just below the surface. A trip underneath Lake Champlain, next.
And we're starting to see those showers over parts of the Champlain Valley and northern